It was an ordinary afternoon in a quiet neighborhood of local town, USA. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks. People went about their daily routines, some walking their dogs, others chatting on porches. No one expected anything unusual to happen. Then, the flashing red and blue lights shattered the calm. A police car pulled over to the side of the road, and within moments, officers stepped out, approaching a woman who had been standing near the corner store. She was just a regular black woman, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, holding a small grocery bag. She hadn't been shouting, causing trouble, or doing anything that would draw attention. Yet, before she knew it, the officers were placing her hands behind her back. The look of shock on her face was undeniable. Passers-by slowed their steps, some watching with concern, others pulling out their phones. The man who stepped out of the car was in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in business casual attire. Slacks, a button-down shirt, and polished shoes. His face was a mixture of concern and confusion as he hurried toward the scene. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice steady but urgent. He looked at his wife, who stood restrained, her wrists secured in handcuffs. One of the officers, a younger man with a stiff posture, glanced at him but didn't answer right away. The other officer, older with a weary expression, finally spoke. "Sir, please stay back." The husband ignored the warning, his focus on his wife. What did she do? His eyes locked onto hers, searching for an explanation. But she looked just as bewildered as he did. I don't know," she stammered, shaking her head slightly. "I was just walking out of the store, and they stopped me." The younger officer adjusted his belt and cleared his throat. "She matched the description of a suspect we were looking for," he said, his tone official and detached. The husband took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "Matched the description?" he repeated. "What description? What crime?" Silence. The officers exchanged glances. The older one sighed. "We're investigating a reported shoplifting in the area. We received a call about a woman fitting her description." The husband's jaw tightened. "And what exactly was that description?" Again silence. A couple of bystanders, sensing the tension, inched closer, their phones recording. The moment felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Then the wife spoke again, her voice firmer this time. "Check the store cameras. I didn't steal anything." The officers hesitated. The husband, now visibly angry, took out his phone. "If you won't check, I will, and I'll make sure this is handled properly." The atmosphere shifted. The officers weren't expecting resistance. Not like this. The older one sighed again, rubbing the back of his neck. "Let's take a look at the footage." The wife exhaled sharply as the younger officer finally unlocked the cuffs. She rubbed her wrists while her husband stood protectively by her side. But something about the officer's hesitation still didn't sit right with him. Something told him this wasn't just a mistake. Something told him the situation was far from over. The small crowd that had gathered followed the officers and the couple as they headed toward the convenience store. The store's owner, a middle-aged man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, looked up in surprise when they walked in. "Sir," the older officer said, "we need to see the security footage from the past half hour." The owner hesitated, then nodded. Sure. Give me a second. He stepped behind the counter, tapping on the screen of an old desktop computer connected to the store's security cameras. The husband stood close to his wife, his arm lightly touching hers, as if reassuring her that he wouldn't let this go unanswered. She remained silent, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. But he could see it, the frustration simmering beneath her calm exterior. Minutes stretched painfully long as the store owner scrolled through the footage. The younger officer leaned in, watching intently. Finally, the grainy black and white video showed the last 20 minutes. There she was, the woman in question. Only, it wasn't his wife. The screen clearly showed another black woman walking into the store, wearing a dark hoodie, moving quickly through the aisles. She grabbed a few items and, in one swift motion, stuffed them into her oversized purse before heading straight for the door. The store clerk behind the counter must have noticed and made the call. The wife's mouth tensed, her patience wearing thin. "Do I look like her to you?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with irritation. The officers were silent. The woman in the footage had similar skin tone and build, but the resemblance stopped there. Different hair, different clothing, even a different gait. Anyone paying attention could have seen the difference. The husband let out a humorless chuckle. "So this is what you meant by matching the description?" He shook his head in disbelief. "You arrested my wife, humiliated her in public, put her in handcuffs, because she was black and standing outside a store?" The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. The older officer sighed, his expression unreadable. "It was a mistake," he said finally. The wife turned to him, eyes blazing. "A mistake?" she repeated. "You didn't just make a mistake. You assumed. You didn't ask questions. You didn't check before putting me in cuffs like a criminal." The store owner cleared his throat awkwardly. The bystanders outside were still filming, their phones pressed against the glass. The husband took a step forward. "What happens now?" His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "You just walk away like nothing happened?" The older officer hesitated. "Ma'am, sir, we apologize for the inconvenience." The wife let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "An inconvenience," she murmured. "Right?" The younger officer, clearly uncomfortable, muttered something into his radio before glancing back at them. "You're free to go." The husband let out a slow breath, staring at the officers for a long moment before turning to his wife. "Come on," he said softly. He placed a hand on her back, guiding her toward the door. As they stepped outside, the crowd that had formed was still there. Some people nodded in quiet understanding. Others murmured amongst themselves. The cameras were still rolling. And as the couple walked back to their car, the wife whispered, "They think this is over." The husband nodded, jaw tight. "It's not." As they got into their car, the wife sat in silence, staring straight ahead. Her hands were still trembling, though she clenched them into fists to hide it. The husband gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "They can't just get away with this," he muttered. She turned to him, her eyes still burning with a quiet fury. "They think they can." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. "We're calling a lawyer. Right now." She reached out and placed her hand over his, pausing him. "I want to think first," she said. "I don't want to just react. I want to do this right." He exhaled sharply but nodded. She was always the strategic one. He was the fire, but she was the one who made sure the fire burned where it mattered. Outside, the small crowd was starting to disperse, but the people who had been recording were still standing near the storefront, discussing what had happened. One of them, a young woman with curly hair, walked up to their car and knocked on the window. The husband rolled it down. "I got everything on video," she said, "and I'm posting it. People need to see this." The wife studied her, then nodded. "Thank you." The young woman hesitated before adding, "If you need support, there are activists and lawyers who deal with cases like this. I can put you in touch." The husband exchanged a glance with his wife, then looked back at the woman. "Send us the video. We'll be in touch." He handed her his phone so she could share her contact info. As they drove off, the wife tapped her fingers against her knee, lost in thought. "They always apologize after the fact," she murmured. He glanced at her. "What are you thinking?" She let out a slow breath. "That this isn't just about us. It's about how often this happens. How many times people just accept it because they don't have proof, because no one listens." She turned to him, her resolve hardening. "But this time, people are listening." He nodded, understanding where this was headed. "So what's next?" She exhaled, then grabbed her phone. "First, we make sure the story is heard. And then, we make sure it doesn't happen to someone else." The car sped forward, the city lights reflecting in the windshield, and as she started typing, the first message she sent out was simple. "This is what happened to me today." And the world was about to listen. The next morning, the wife's phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications flooded in comments, retweets, shares. The video of her wrongful arrest had gone viral overnight. Thousands of people were talking about it, calling out the officers, the department, and the injustice of it all. News outlets had picked it up, and journalists were already reaching out for interviews. She scrolled through the comments, seeing a mix of outrage, support, and, of course, the usual skeptics. "This happens way too often. Why did they assume she was guilty before even checking? They wouldn't have treated her like this if she wasn't black. She should sue them." Her husband sat across the kitchen table, watching her carefully. "It's blowing up," he said. "Are you ready for this?" She took a deep breath, placing her phone down. "I don't know, but I know I can't ignore it." Before she could say more, her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she had a feeling she should answer. "Hello?" she said cautiously. A woman's voice came through, firm but kind. "Hi, my name is Angela Carter. I'm a civil rights attorney. I saw your video. If you're interested, I'd like to talk about your legal options." She sat up straighter, glancing at her husband. Yes, I'd like that." In the following days, everything moved fast. With Angela Carter's help, they filed a formal complaint against the officers involved and the police department. News stations covered the story, interviewing her about what happened. More people came forward, sharing their own experiences of racial profiling and wrongful arrests. Under pressure, the police department issued a statement, calling the incident a regrettable mistake and promising an internal review. But people weren't satisfied. Then, a week later, the mayor held a press conference. "Accountability is necessary," he said. "The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, And we will be implementing new training programs to prevent situations like this from happening again. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Sitting in a cafe, the wife scrolled through an email from Angela. The city had agreed to a settlement, and the officers involved had faced disciplinary action. It wasn't justice, but it was acknowledgement. Her husband sipped his coffee, watching her. "So," he said, "do you feel like we did the right thing?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "We spoke up. We didn't let them sweep it under the rug. And now, maybe the next person in my position won't have to go through this." He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'm proud of you." She smiled, squeezing back. "I'm proud of us." Outside, life continued, people walking, laughing, moving forward. And as she looked around, she realized something. She had been afraid that night, standing on that sidewalk, wrists in cuffs. But she wasn't afraid now. And that, she thought, was victory in itself.